Hello brothers and sisters, welcome back to the channel. Today we want to learn something which I believe it's so much important. Some of you don't know what is Christian Zionism. Christian Zionism is a religious and political belief held mainly by evangelical Christians who see modern state Israel as the fulfillment of biblical prophecy and believe that supporting Israel is a divine duty. It teaches that return of the Jew to the Holy Land and the establishment of Israel are necessary steps leading to the second coming of Christ. And as a result, Christian Zionism often support Israel unconditionally, politically, financially, and militarily, viewing it as survival and expansion as part of God's plan rather than a matter of human politics or justice. Join me in today's discussion while I'm going to be hosting Professor Jiang Shojin talking about how Christian Zionism later on came and influenced America, the problems that we are having today and what we are seeing today. Part of the problem that we are seeing today with Christian Zionism first is the moral corruption of American Christianity, the manipulation of U.S. foreign policy, the erosion of critical thinking and democracy, the strengthening of military-industrial complex, and the hypocrisy of moral exemptionalism, and lastly, the suppression of peace efforts, the exploitation of ordinary believers. Brothers and sisters, join me in today's discussion as we are going to see Professor Jiang Shojin explaining to you how Christian Zionism took over America. Brothers and sisters, if you're watching me for the first time, please consider subscribing to the channel, join my membership, and really get to see what I can offer you. So let's learn together. I'll be back and I'll be giving my commentary in regards to this. So let's watch. I'll be back.
In my last video, I discussed how Isaac Newton built the intellectual foundations for Christian Zionism, which is driving American Middle East policy today. And today I want to explain to you why Christian Zionism is such a powerful force in the world. So here, let me introduce to you the universal law of game theory. Once you master this formula, once you truly understand the ramifications, the nuances, the subtleties of this law, then you will have a much more clear and deeper understanding of how the world works. Okay, and this formula, it's very simple. It goes like this. If you look at game theories, all games, the people who always win the game, they win because of this formula, which is mass times energy times coordination. All right, so mass is just the number of people times energy, which is the level of motivation of these people, times coordination, which is the ability of these people to work together to achieve their end. Some things to keep in mind about this formula. First of all, the different factors are not weighted equally. So coordination is the most important factor, and it's weighted at least 3 times as much as mass. Then you have energy, and energy is what's second most important, and it's weighted twice as much as mass. And depending on the game, the weightings can be different. But please keep this in mind. Coordination is what really matters, followed by energy, followed ultimately by mass. So if I explain that, let me explain to you what each term means and how we can measure each factor to get a more mathematical understanding of this formula. Mass is just the number of people involved, but what's important to measure is their cohesion, how much they like each other, how much they're willing to work together. So, for example, you look at Japan and China. Japan is a much more cohesive society than China. So in terms of mass, Japan is actually stronger than China, even though China has 10 times or 5 times as many people as Japan. Then you look at energy. Energy is the level of motivation. And usually when we think of energy, we think of physical energy. But actually, in this formula, it's mental energy that really matters, because if you think about it, it's mental energy that is the most expensive, and so you need the most amount of motivation in order to achieve mental energy. So let me give you an example of this. Let's just say there are two people. The first person, he's digging a hole in the ground for 12 hours a day for a whole year. Then you have another person who every day is seeking to improve himself. So he's constantly in the process of self-reflection, writing down the ways that he can improve, and creating a strategy, a formula for how he can improve himself. Well, according to this formula, the second person is expending much more energy than the first person, even though if we just look at it, it seems like it's the first person that's doing all the work, the second person just sitting around all day just thinking. And the reason why is, in the world, the three hardest words to say for a human being is, I am wrong. To say I'm wrong is to negate yourself, to negate your ego, to admit that you have failings. To say you are wrong is also to commit to a policy of self-improvement, self-change. It's also a tremendous loss of face to say I'm wrong before your peers. You lower your status, you lose face. And that's why people who are more energetic, who are more motivated, they are much more open to change. They're much more willing to accept their limitations. They're much more willing to commit to self-improvement. So energy is a measure of motivation, and we can measure motivation by a group's openness to accepting its limitations, its failings. Okay, so that's the idea of energy. Then the third aspect of this formula is the idea of coordination. And coordination can be divided into two different types. The first type is conscious coordination. Second type is subconscious coordination. Conscious coordination is when you're led by someone. It could be a leader, it could be a bureaucracy, it could be a patriarch. Subconscious coordination is when there's no clear leader or clear direction, people just subconsciously work together. It's almost like a dance. And of the two, subconscious coordination is the more powerful. When people get together and they sort of conspire together, that leads to all sorts of problems. You don't want conspiracy. You don't want open conspiracies. So let me explain to you why open conspiracies or secret conspiracies are bad policy. Okay? The first reason is it's really hard to maintain the secrecy of a conspiracy. Eventually, word's going to leak out that these people are conspiring together. And if word leaks out that these people are conspiring together, that forces other people to conspire together in this game. So, if you are conspiring together, you have to keep it secret in order to maintain your advantage. But it's very, very hard to keep it secret. In fact, you probably waste more time and energy keeping it secret than you do in actually trying to implement your conspiracy. Okay, so that's the first reason why conspiracies are not a good idea. Second reason is, in most games, conspiracies are illegal. It's considered cheating. So you lose plausible deniability when you are conspiring together and when you're keeping notes and when you're meeting in a room together and plotting together. The third reason is the most important. Okay, the third reason why you don't want to conspire together is everyone has an ego. Everyone is trying to maximize his or her self-interest in a conspiracy. And that immediately leads to friction, conflict, debate. So this creates friction in the relationship. So subconscious coordination is much more powerful than conscious coordination. It allows for frictionless cooperation and allows for plausible deniability and allows for secrecy. So examples of subconscious coordination are families, ethnicities, religions, okay? So having said that, okay, having presented this formula, mass times energy times coordination. So now I want to discuss how to maximize this formula. Remember, the trick is, how do you create subconscious coordination in your team? And believe it or not, the answer is to have a really powerful story. A powerful story, it's a way to frame your understanding of the world, and it's also a script. It allows you to understand how to behave in a certain context. All right, so let me explain to you the power of a story. All right, let's do a thought experiment first. Let's imagine that we have the power to present every single story in human history to every single person who's ever lived and who's still alive today. And the stories we present include Star Wars, Lord of the Rings, Disney movies, Homer, the Iliad, the Bible. Every single story that humans have ever produced is presented to every single person. And then 10 years from now, we talk to every single person again and figure out what story that person most remembered and tabulate the results. When we do so, then what we will discover is that most people will have remembered 3 stories. Okay? The first story is Plato's allegory of the cave. The second story is the crucifixion and resurrection of Jesus. The third story is the second coming of Jesus. Okay? So let me explain all 3 stories. Okay, so Plato's allegory of the cave, it's interesting because it's really Plato's reimagining of the trial of Socrates. For him, his mentor Socrates, who was forced to drink hemlock by Athenians for the crime of corrupting the youth of Athens, for Plato, Socrates was this truth teller who discovered the truth of the world through philosophy. And he committed himself to revealing this truth to the Athenian people. And in response, the Athenian people condemned him to death because, as I mentioned previously, no one likes to say, I'm wrong. And no one likes to be told they're wrong. The second story, the crucifixion and resurrection of Jesus, it's interesting because it is actually a reimagining of Plato's allegory of the cave, because Jesus was this truth teller sent by God to earth to reveal the truth of the universe to people. In response, we killed Jesus. Okay, so the allegory of the cave and the crucifixion of Jesus, it's really just one story. Second coming of Jesus is really compelling because it's marking the end of history. It's telling us when everything will come to an end and when we will have achieved paradise and reconciliation with God. So these 3 stories that are most memorable, it's really just one story. And it's appealing to us because as humans, we're born with 3 questions embedded in our hearts, in our soul. The first question is, where did we come from? Second question is, why are we here? Third question is, where are we going? And the power of these 3 stories, Plato's allegory of the cave, the crucifixion of Jesus, the second coming of Jesus, it's really helping us answer all 3 questions in a compelling and convincing manner. And that's why Christian Zionism is so powerful, because it's the most powerful story out there. That's why there's so many Christians. That's why Christian Zionists are the most energetic, the most motivated, the most committed people that you can ever meet. And again, the story, it is really a script. As a Christian Zionist, you want to achieve the story. It is so compelling, so powerful to you as a person. In fact, you're willing to sacrifice your own life in order to achieve this story. That's how beautiful it is. And that explains to us, that helps us understand why Christian Zionism is the most powerful force in the world today. Because for the people who believe in Christian Zionism, They feel as though they discovered the secret of the universe, and they must bring this story into fruition, into reality. Now, next thing I want to talk about is, if it is true that this story, the crucifixion of Jesus and the second coming, is such a powerful story, then in theory, we should have seen the story. We should have seen people try to achieve the story before, and also it's telling us that the story, Christian Zionism, will never ever go away. It will continue until the end of human history. So what I will do now is tell you that actually 1500 years ago, they also tried to achieve the completion of this story. So 1500 years ago, about 600 Common Era, there was this massive war going on between the two major powers of that age. The Byzantine Empire, based in Constantinople, and then you have the Sasanian Persian Empire. And this war just devastated the entire world. People were dying, people were starving, people were in debt, people were in slavery, there was religious persecution. It really felt like the end times, the end of days. Also at this time, the Jews were banned from Jerusalem, which is their holy city. It's the city of their God, Yahweh. And so the Jews in the diaspora were plotting throughout all this time how to return to Jerusalem. They were kicked out of Jerusalem because many centuries before, they had fought 3 major rebellions against the Roman Empire. And in each time, the Jews lost because we're fighting the Roman Empire. And each time, the Jews went to the desert of Arabia. Why did these armies, these defeated armies, go into the desert of Arabia? Because the Romans really hated sand. They could only be safe in the desert of Arabia. And when they went to the desert of Arabia, they went there with commitment to eventually reclaim Jerusalem, to wait for the arrival of the Messiah to lead them to final victory against the Romans. And while they were in the desert of Arabia, they were interacting with the local Arab pagans. And in this interaction, there's a process of syncretization where Jewish belief was being meshed into Arab pagan belief. But as I told you, the most compelling story always wins out. So eventually, the Jewish belief that the Messiah would eventually come to create the Messianic age of truth, justice. Eventually, it won over the Arab people. And this would become the foundation for the modern belief of Islam. And so during this time, there's a widespread belief in the Arabian desert that a Messiah will eventually come to unite the Jewish people and lead them into final victory against the Roman Empire, which at this time had not become the Byzantine Empire. Back in the Jewish diaspora, they were trying to figure out how to return to Jerusalem. One group in this Jewish diaspora allied themselves with the Persians, who promised them that they would, like Cyrus the Great, take them back to Jerusalem and build the third temple for them. And at first they succeeded. The Persians were able to conquer Jerusalem, and the Jews were able to reclaim the city for themselves. And they were now in the process of building the third temple. The problem, though, is that at this time in history, the majority of the population were actually Christian. So the Christians rebelled against the Jews, and then the Christians called for help to the Byzantine Empire. At this time, a new general, Heraclius, had emerged, and he had usurped the throne from the emperor. And so now the new emperor, Heraclius, he has a legitimacy problem. And so he decided like the best way to prove that he in fact has the mandate of heaven, that he has the will of God supporting him, he decides that he has to reclaim Jerusalem and basically massacre all the Jews. So at this time in history, it seemed all hope was lost. Jews were being massacred. It seemed as though the Antichrist, Heraclius, has emerged to destroy the Jewish nation. Now, the funny thing about Jewish eschatology is that when all hope seems lost, when the Antichrist has emerged, when the Jewish nation is about to be completely destroyed, that's when Jewish people are most convinced the Jewish Messiah will emerge to lead them into war and into the final victory against the Antichrist and usher in the Messianic age where they will reconstitute the nation of Israel, bring everyone home from the Jewish diaspora, build a third temple, and create a millennium of peace, truth, and justice. So the Jews go into Arabian desert and now they're looking for their Messiah, the promised Messiah. And there are different candidates, but ultimately they settle on one charismatic man who is absolutely convinced that he is in fact the Jewish Messiah. We don't know his name, okay? A lot of his biography has been lost to us over the course of history, but today we refer to him as Muhammad, okay? Muhammad was the Jewish Messiah. And the Jews were looking to him to lead them into final victory against the Byzantines and the Antichrist, Heraclius. And he took up the call. And according to game theory, all he had to do was say three things, and he would unite the entire world behind him. And once he did so, he would become a tidal wave to wash over the old order and build the Messianic age. All he had to do was say three things, okay? The first thing he had to say was, I am the Jewish Messiah. I'm the fulfillment of the prophecy. I am the promised one. I'm the anointed one. Okay, that's the first thing. Second thing he needed to say is that we are all the children of Abraham. Jews, Christians, Muslims, we are all descended from Abraham. And as such, we are all the children of God. And as such, this land was promised to us by God, and therefore debt, slavery, landlessness, it's all evil in the eyes of God. And therefore, we must create a revolution to ensure that everyone has land, that debt is canceled, that slavery is eliminated from this world. So that's why I'm here. I'm the Messiah to lead us to final victory in the pursuit of the Messianic age. And the third thing that Muhammad had to say in order to unite the world is, all these religious differences are idiotic. Zoroastrianism, Catholic Christianity, Nestorian Christianity, Orthodox Christianity, Judaism. It does not, these factions are against the will of God. We are all the children of God, and therefore we can all celebrate God in our own way. These factions, these divisions only exist for the priest class to exploit us, for the emperor, for the political class to unite, to divide and conquer us. Okay, so you are free to celebrate your religion. You're free to celebrate God, your faith, in any way you seem fit. Okay, and this is what eventually led to something called the Constitution of Medina, where one of the founding ideologies of Islam is religious tolerance. You are free to practice your faith in any way. You're free to love God in any way. And because he said these three things, Muhammad would lead the world's first global revolution against the established order, and thus creating the basic structure of Islam. Unfortunately, Muhammad died before he could complete his mission, but that didn't stop many Jews from believing that he was in fact the Jewish Messiah. Because in their eyes, the prophecy has been fulfilled. First of all, the Arabs were able to reconquer Jerusalem and return the Jews to Jerusalem, thus reconstituting the nation of Israel. Second of all, they built the third temple. Today we call it the Al-Aqsa Mosque. It's still there in Jerusalem. You can still visit it. But back then they thought it was a third temple. And the third thing is they did usher in a millennium of peace, prosperity, truth, justice. Today we call it the Islamic Golden Age. Okay, so for many Jews, the prophecy had been fulfilled, and that's why many Jews converted to Islam during this process. And many Jews would emerge as the top administrators, the top officials of the Islamic Golden Age, making tremendous contributions to world civilization in the process. Unfortunately, what we also know about this period is that the early followers of Muhammad, called the companions, they were all basically eliminated in the power struggle that emerged after the death of Muhammad. Okay, so I know that for many of you, this is extremely controversial history, and I don't have enough time to go into the specific details. So what I will do is, in the description below, I'm going to link a really awesome paper written by two Jewish religious historians about this time, so you can have a better understanding of how Muhammad really is the Jewish Messiah. I'm also going to link to have a lot of wiki links, so you can do some more background research into this period. It's really fascinating, and I apologize I don't have enough time to go into more details about this period. Okay, so to summarize, according to game theory, the universal law of game theory, Christian Zionists will emerge as dominant power in the Middle East. They're the ones driving U.S. policy right now. They will eventually overwhelm both the American empire and the global financial elite. They will force the United States to send in ground troops and invade Iran in order to implement regime change. And they will basically get whatever they want. So it seems as though we figured out history. It seems we're able to predict the future by using game theory properly and systematically. And honestly, we're able to have a very clear insight into the trajectory of history. The problem, though, is game theory is not that easy. Okay? Why? Because according to game theory, when it seems like they structure the game, when there seems to be a trajectory, when the players are obvious in their moves, when there's certain inevitability to the decision-making of certain players, what will happen is a new player will emerge who sees the contours of the game being played, and he will manipulate events and change the course of this game to benefit himself and his group. Okay? Now, Hegel's name for this person, for this player, is the world historical figure. Nietzsche's name for this player is the Ubermensch, the Superman, the person who's able to step outside of history and control the reins of history in order to achieve his own ends. And by doing so, he's able to forever change the course of human history. Now, according to game theory, now that the game, the structure of the game has is pretty clear, the Ubermensch will now emerge. And in fact, today we do have the Ubermensch. And this Ubermensch will manipulate the game in order to achieve his vision. And he will forever change the course of human history. And this person's name is Vladimir Putin. So in my next video, I'm going to discuss who Vladimir Putin really is, what he wants, and how he will achieve his vision. So thank you for today. I hope you enjoyed the talk, and I'll continue the talk next week. Also, some of you in the comment section have been telling me how much you want to support my work, and I'm really grateful for it, and I would really appreciate your support. So you don't have to do it. I'm committed to educating you for free. You don't have to pay me anything. You don't have to. You don't have to give me anything. But I would really appreciate it if you have the means to buy me a coffee. Okay. So thanks a lot, and I will see everyone next time.
Hello brothers and sisters, welcome back to the channel. I'm hoping that you are doing great from wherever you're watching me from. I'm your host and presenter Jindok Stories. Let's have a chat in regards to this. You understand that Christian Zionism has negatively influenced America, both politically and spiritually. The ideology, while cloaked in religious devotions, it has in many ways distorted U.S. democracy, foreign policy, and moral compass. Many scholars and theologians from within and outside Christianity have warned that Christian Zionism has turned America's faith and politics into tools of manipulation, serving imperial interests rather than the genuine spirituality or justice. And here, this is my analysis of what I came up with and I wanted to discuss with you. First of all, what I wanted to say is that the moral corruption of American Christianity, that's one of the problems that Christian Zionism has brought. Christian Zionism has deeply corrupted the moral foundation of American Christianity. Instead of promoting love, compassion, and justice, the core teachings of Christ, it reoriented faith around geopolitical power and the worship of modern nation state. Churches that once preached about humility and peace now preach about war, vengeance, and the necessity of Israeli dominance. This distortion has turned Christianity into a nationalist ideology that glorifies violence in the name of prophecy. Many pastors have become political operatives rather than spiritual leaders, using the Bible as a justification for oppression rather than liberation, right? Secondly, what I wanted to also note about this is the manipulation of the U.S. foreign policy. And we have seen this even in current times. Americans' foreign policy in the Middle East has been profoundly shaped and arguably distorted by Christian Zionism. Politicians seeking evangelical votes have aligned their intentional policies with apocalyptic interpretations of the Bible rather than strategic logic or ethical standards. Billions of U.S. tax dollars flows annually to Israeli military apparatus, while domestic needs like healthcare, education, and infrastructure are neglected. The result is that America acts less like a neutral superpower pursuing diplomacy and more like a theocratic state fulfilling a divine script, one that keeps the region in endless conflict. Also, another thing that I wanted to address in this presentation is that the erosion of critical thinking and democracy, that's another devastating effect that it came with. Remember that Christian Zionism has cultivated an anti-intellectual culture that discourages questioning or analysis of U.S.-Israel relations. To question Israel policies to oppose God, according to this ideology, a dangerous mindset that kills democratic debate. In this environment, American citizens are taught not to think critically about war, justice, or human rights. This theological blindness has made it easier for political and corporations to manipulate public opinion using religious emotions rather than to justify foreign interventions. It has also deepened polarization. The dissenters labeled as anti-Christian or anti-American. Another thing that I also like to address is the strengthening of military-industrial complex. Yes, this is happening in real time, and we are all seeing this. Remember that Christian Zionism has become one of the ideological engines fueling the US war machine. By framing wars in the Middle East as part of holy struggle, it provides moral cover for military expansion and defensive spending. Defensive contractors, arms manufacturers, and political elites exploit this ideology to keep Americans emotionally invested in perpetual wars. Every military action becomes sanctified, no longer a matter of policy, but prophecy. This has cost thousands of Americans' lives, trillions of dollars, and untold damage to America's moral credibility around the world. Um, Also, another thing that I would like to address is the hypocrisy of moral exemptionalism. Let's talk about this. This ideology reinforces a toxic belief in American exceptionalism, the idea that America has a divine right to dominate and reshape the world. Christian Zionists interpret America's power as proof of God's blessing, which justifies the nation's exploitation of others. This religious arrogance blinds Americans to their government human rights abuses and global double standards. It leads to moral hypocrisy, condemning other nations for violence or corruption while excusing Israel's military aggression and Americans' own imperial wars. Scholars have noted that this mindset mirrors the same theological arrogance that once justified colonialism and slavery. Um, Also, I would like to talk about the suppression of peace efforts. Christian Zionism stands as one of the major obstacles to peace in the Middle East because it views the Israeli occupation and expansion into Palestinian territories as fulfillment of prophecy. It rejects any negotiation that involves territorial compromise. American leaders influenced by this theology often block UN resolutions, peace talks, or humanitarian interventions. This not only sustains Palestinian suffering, but also damages America's global reputation as a mediator for peace. It turns America into an enabler of injustice, a nation that supports occupation while preaching freedom and democracy. Also, I'd like to talk about the exploitation of ordinary believers. Yes, millions of American evangelicals have been psychologically manipulated into supporting foreign policies that contradict their own interests. They are told that donating to Israel, voting for war-driven politicians, or opposing peace in their Christian duty. Yet these same leaders ignore the poverty, racial inequality, and moral decay within America itself. Christian Zionism, in this sense, became a form of spiritual colonization, exploiting sincere faith for political gain. The ordinary believer's spirituality is weaponized to serve geopolitical agendas they don't even benefit from. Um, so please let me know what you think about this, because I'm going to be talking about the decline of Americans' moral and spiritual authority. Christian Zionism has damaged America's global image as a nation guided by justice, freedom, and moral leadership. By aligning itself unconditionally with one side of complex conflict and justifying oppression in God's name, America has alienated millions in the Muslim world and beyond. It has also turned Christianity, once seen as a moral force, into a symbol of hypocrisy and imperialism. The Asian American professor critic likely concludes that Christian Zionism has made America less democratic, less moral, and less self-aware. So, please let me know what you think about this video. I'm your host and presenter, Agent Stories. But until then, let me see you in my next video. Peace, love, and harmony. Salute.